The Green Bay Packers had a bigger receiver problem last year than I even realized. Luckily for the team, the front office realized it and they tried to change it.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. I was a big fan of the Packers receivers going into last year. But by the end of the year, it had become clear the group was not good enough. And I spent a good part of the offseason saying, look, they need to find a way to make this offense in such a way that they have a #1 receiver. And I made the case at various points that that guy could be on the team, whether it's Tucker Kraft, whether it's Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, eventually Christian Watson. Again, I don't think it's Romeo Doubs, but last year on the money downs, it was, in fact, Romeo Doubs. I hinted at this last week when we talked about the potential for a Romeo Doubs trade on third and gotta have it situations. It was Romeo Doubs when the Packers were converting those passing plays. But I referenced a piece that I wrote on Friday for The Leap. And it was about those third and have to have it plays. 3rd and 7 or more. And in those situations, by far the biggest issue that the Packers had was the receivers coming up short in 54 dropbacks on 3rd and must pass, excluding 3rd and a mile, so 3rd and 20 plus. The Packers receivers had 5 drops, 5 PBUs, and 2 coverage plays, plus 2 throwaways, which is another way of saying no one was open. So that is a sizable portion of that cohort. That's not great. That's not great. 1 out of every 4 3rd and longs resulted in a play that a receiver could have or should have made, but didn't. 1 out of every 4. Well, in a given game, you're going to have 8, 12, 15 third down situations, depending on the game, depending on the length of your drives, depending on the efficiency of your offense. Let's say you have 10 third downs. Well, that's 2, at least 2.5 third downs. Can't have half a third down in real life, but on average, 2.5 third downs that you're missing out on because your receivers weren't good enough. And when you go back and you track it in the biggest games, a bunch of them were against the Eagles. A bunch of them were against the Vikings. Now, part of that is you're in 3rd and a long time in the games against the better team. The first time they played the Vikings, 6 3rd and very longs. The second time they played the Vikings, 6 3rd and very longs. The second time they played the Eagles, 6 3rd and very longs. Now, it's not all man coverage. I've tried to make this point before. It's not about just beating man coverage, but your receivers have to be able to make plays. They have to get open. They have to find ways to, in adversity situations, make the most of the opportunities presented to them. And last year, more often than not, in the clutch situations, they just didn't do it. And the reason this is important is we talked about the pressure piece of this, and we'll hit on that in a second. But Jordan Love was not the problem. Only 2 of those 54 plays that I mentioned did I chart as missed throws to open receivers. 2. So that is not the issue. Jordan Love is not the problem. And there are regularly guys open that Love is able to find. Their pressure was part of the problem too. The single biggest driver of inefficiencies on third down for the Packers was receiver. And so it's not a surprising thing. And we talked about this a little bit last week with Chancellor Johnson, that the Packers go out and you just watch the last 6 games or so from Matthew Golden. When Texas's season is on the line, SEC championship game, college football playoff game, it is Matthew Golden who makes every big play, every big catch, every third down conversion. They are funneling their offense through him. And I'm someone, and I feel like I have to add this caveat every time because the people who like him get mad at me and the people who don't like him get mad at me. I was not a huge fan of the pick, but when you look at what they lacked last season, I can't watch Matthew Golden's tape and not say in those big moments, he didn't come through, because he did. 4th and 13, game on the line against Arizona State. Not just the first down, a touchdown. And he said they knew in the huddle it was going to be a touchdown. He cooks the safety. Quinn Ewers puts it on him. He makes a catch. It's adversity plays. It's coming back to find the football. It is third and contested. It is goal line contested. He's making those kinds of plays. The clutch plays that this team lacked. I'll take you back. Houston, first half. Third down. This is one of the charted drops. The Packers have the perfect play call. They clear out one side against zone coverage against the Texans. They bring Jaden Reed across the formation, deep over. Love lays it out. Jaden Reed, it's a 50-yard throw in the air. Jaden Reed reaches out, has to go to the ground. It's not diving is overstating it, because it's not like it's a terrible throw. It's a good throw, not a great throw. It's a play you absolutely expect your number 1, even your number 2 receiver to make. It would have changed the complexion of the game. It gives you a chance to score a touchdown or at least a field goal if all he does is hang on to it and they get no more yards. They're in field goal range. And he couldn't make the play. Those are the plays that you hope Matthew Golden can make. He doesn't have to be your number 1, like he gets 140 targets this year guy. One of the things we've talked about over the last few years, in 2023, we talked about this too, is if they could just get a Kendrick Bourne type, a Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings is a great example of this archetype of player. On 3rd and 6 against the 49ers, the guy that more than Deebo Samuel, more than George Kittle, the guy that I was worried about watching the game was Juwan Jennings. Now, Brandon Ayuk's really good too, obviously, but Juwan Jennings was the guy from the slot usually. He's going out there and he is going to win one-on-one, because even if he doesn't win, he can body you up. He can make a contested catch in traffic. Now, Matthew Golden, 5'11", 190. He's only going to be able to do that so much. Well, enter Savion Williams. We've seen he's got that highlight that has gone all around Packers social media, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, wherever, of him leaping up between 2 defenders, going up and making a play. His hands are inconsistent. Yes, they are. But when he's got to have it, he has it. And that's the guy to me that you can scheme stuff up that makes it easier on 3rd down. Or it's 3rd and 6. Maybe you scheme a rushing touch for Savion Williams. Okay, let's make this fair. The cohort, 3rd and 7 plus. All right, 3rd and 7. You scheme up some sort of tunnel screen for Savion Williams and hope he can get, if not 7 yards, 6 or 5 yards to set up a 4th and we can do this. And I didn't, I only charted successful conversions, not, hey, did they get in a position to get to fourth downs? Though there probably should be its own category for something like that. I hope the Packers are going to feel like they're more emboldened to go this year than in previous years. But he is a player who, Sean McVay, one of the things I was always so taken by early on in the McVay, and he still does it from time to time. It's 3rd and 12. And you got a team in a too high look. They're guarding against the big play, and he's got a tunnel screen call, a receiver screen, and they get it. And it didn't have to be to anyone special. Robert Woods is not a special receiver, just a good player in the time at his prime, and they pick it up, and you just go, come on. Come on. Well, Savion Williams is that type of guy. Scheme that up for him on 3rd and 12 and just let him go. The Packers barely ran screens in these situations, did not run a bunch of them. You'd think they would, especially if the critics for Jordan Love are going, oh, well, it's all Matt LaFleur. Oh, they're babying him. Only threw 5 screens in these obvious passing situations. So they're giving him the chance to go play quarterback. And it's not that Jordan Love is not finding the right guys, is not making the right throws. It's that the receivers were letting him down, which is exactly why they went out and took care of business the way that they did. But that's not all. But wait, there's more. The same thing is true on the offensive line. Again, a similar situation where I didn't quite see it in real time. And then in the offseason, I go, oh, that's interesting. Went back and looked at these 3rd down situations. The Packers must have too, because they saw what I saw. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Packers. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Plus, collaborating with your partner is smoother and easier than ever. Track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page, hopefully without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's Monarch Money, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. So the Packers go into the offseason and they sign a big money guard in free agency. They use a 2nd round pick on Anthony Belton. Well, what exactly is that about? Well, I went back and looked at these 3rd and long situations, remember? After the receiver issue, the second biggest issue the Packers faced in these 3rd and must passes was pressure. And it wasn't a huge number. Only 8 of those 54 plays is pressure. So, like, in a game, CJ Stroud, I think the Packers pressured CJ Stroud 40+% of the time. This is way below that, and that's for the game. This is must pass. So that they held up for sure. But when that's the way that your season ends, Travis Glover, Kadeem Telfort, Minnesota Vikings. The play, in fact, that I put in the article in the Leap is from the Vikings game, the second one. And you're in a division with Brian Flores, who's going to scheme up a bunch of crazy stuff. And what would happen all too often is, a stunt or a twist or a game or a simulated pressure would get a free rusher in Jordan Love's face. Well, Jordan Love's superpower, one of them, is he does not take sacks. He's able to avoid sacks, just has this preternatural ability to escape pressure and find angles. But on this particular play, Zach Tom also gets beat. So there's nowhere for Jordan Love to go, nowhere to spin out, nowhere to escape, because the best player on the line gets beat. So I think the Packers went into this offseason going, we have to make this offensive line as bulletproof as we possibly can. So rather than replace Josh Myers, You replace Elton Jenkins at left guard, move Jenkins to center, and you spend big money on Aaron Banks. And then you bring in Anthony Belton, who, by the way, said the thing that he noticed about the playbook is these guys want to run downhill and hit somebody. So, great. That's what Anthony Belton was brought in for, though. It's funny that he's sort of been cast because he's 6'6", 336 as this, mauler run blocker type. And I think pretty clearly he's better in pass protection than in run blocking. That being said, they wanted to make sure they're not in a position where you can just pick at one of these spots. And that if they do have someone struggling, they can move them out. Or they have competition at this spot. They have competition at that spot. And look, Zach Tom's locked in at right tackle. He's going to get paid. Aaron Banks is locked in. He just got paid. They're moving Elton Jenkins to center. Brian Gutekunst said on the record they think Elton Jenkins can be an all-pro center. They use a first-round pick on Jordan Morgan. They use a second-round pick on Anthony Belton. They use a third-round pick on Sean Ryan. And Rasheed Walker was the preferred starter for 17 games last year in the playoffs. That's 7 guys plus competition for 2 spots. They went into this offseason going, we need to get this buttoned up. And then, of course, future-proof. Okay? Sean Ryan, Rasheed Walker, we want the options of being able to bring you back if necessary. But if not, we got it. And we got it on cheap contracts because these guys are getting expensive. The allocation resources, the allocation of resources, excuse me. If you're going to take a guard in the second round, that's given this team, I think that is a little much, though I like the value of Anthony Belton given where he was drafted. That's right in the range of where I had him. I thought he was a sort of a late second-ish kind of player. I liked him more than most. And I've been on here and I've said, look, I get it. I'm outside the mainstream on Matthew Golden, and I fully accept that. I'm outside the mainstream on Anthony Belton, but I also accept that because the Packers agree with me. That is changing in a little bit. The guard piece of this, given what guards are now being paid, because defensive tackle money is getting close to defensive end money. The guys who are blocking those defensive tackles are going, we need to get paid too. And it's not that guard has suddenly become a glamour position. It hasn't, but it is becoming a more valuable position as the passing game becomes a more important part of what you're doing, because as a running back, you are very dependent on what the run game is doing, but you can manage. When there's, we saw Josh Jacobs. The run blocking was not great last year. Josh Jacobs was incredibly productive. The difference between a 1 yard gain and a 3 yard gain is not nothing, but it's also marginal. But the difference between it's a 60-yard touchdown and it's an incomplete pass because our guard couldn't get just enough of that looping defensive end, that's the value. You have to be able to provide that. And so for the Packers, they want to make sure the guys that they have out there, and then the backup plans, are more solid now than they were last year. And I don't think you needed the playoff game, the Philadelphia game, to know that. The Packers were one of the healthiest teams in the league last year along the offensive line. They had terrific continuity. It's not a surprise that all the best teams in terms of offensive line continuity were the best teams in the league. You need that. But if you're going to have depth, well, you don't need that quite as much. We've had Joe Thomas on the show before talking about how important continuity is in general. Talked about, back in 2023, there was a lot of the Yash Nyman and Rasheed Walker. And then it was Sean Ryan and John Runyon Jr. They're rotating snaps. What is going on here? Is this work? Is this sustainable? Is this tenable? I don't think any team wants that. I credit the Packers. I give them kudos for being willing to take that risk, because most teams are not willing to do that. They're going, okay, you won the starting job and now you're the starter until you play bad enough we have to bench you. Well, that's not the way the Packers operate. They say, hey, we think we have 2 guys good enough to start, and we're going to let them both play until one of them proves that they deserve it, or we realize neither of these guys are that good. And in the case of what the Packers have done over the last few years when that has happened, they let Rasheed Walker continue to play. I didn't understand it because I thought Yosh Nijman had clearly outplayed him. And then Rasheed Walker kind of takes off. Yosh Nijman craters. And the Packers were absolutely right to handle it the way that they did. John Runyon Jr., Sean Ryan. Frankly, I was surprised that they continued to rotate there because I thought John Runyon Jr. was playing pretty well. It turned out, and we talked to him at Super Bowl for the show that year, that it turned out he was hurt and they were really just saving his body. He wasn't physically quite able to give them a whole game. But this, going back, Elton Jenkins splitting reps with Lane Taylor. The Packers are willing to do that. And I think as we go into the season, I'm not going to be surprised if they're rotating left tackles, if they're rotating right guards. And if by the middle of the season that Jordan Morgan and Anthony Belton are the starters, that won't be surprising to me either. Big investments that they've made, they want to see those investments pay off. All right, it's Monday. Let's do a 2026 mock draft Monday. I'm kidding. I hope you didn't turn it off. I'm kidding. We're not going to do that. But we will talk about the Packers and some Locked On power rankings that I don't understand. We'll talk about it next. Locked On, they pulled the hosts and put together a power ranking. Packers are not in the top 5, which I'm not surprised about. Eagles, Bills, Ravens, Lions, Chiefs. Hard to argue with that top 5. What happens after that is strange. The 49ers are at 6. Did people not watch the 49ers last year? Did people not see what happened to that team last year? Did they not see what happened in the offseason? The 49ers won 6 games last year. Their starting quarterback played. Deebo Samuel now plays in D.C. Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, they play in Denver now. Have you looked at their defensive line lately? It's Nick Bosa and the Bosa-ettes. I understand they drafted Michael Williams in the first round. This team, Trent Williams is 45 years old. Not really, but almost. Christian, like, what is that? What? Now, I know they have a nice Vegas win total here. Our friends at FanDuel like them a lot, but that's because their schedule is hot garbage. Okay, let's just move past the 49ers. Surely the Packers have to be right in here, right? No, the Bengals are 7 because they kept T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. The Bengals won 9 games last year. Their defense was absolute trash, terrible. And they've done what exactly to remedy that? They play an extremely difficult division. What am I missing here? Yes, they kept all their guys, their main, like the Trey Hendrickson, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. They didn't have to trade any of those players. Cool. How did they make their team better in the ways that they were bad last year? Can they rush the passer any better? Are they going to cover any better? The Packers won 11 games last year. They were top 5, top 10 on offense and defense. The Bengals? All right, well, at least the Packers are 8th, right? No, the Chargers are 8th. The Chargers. We have nobody to throw to Chargers. The team that had a quarterback have a complete and total meltdown against the Texans. That Chargers team. They didn't really do anything that interesting in the offseason. They let Joey Bosa walk out the door. They did retain Khalil Mack. How are they significantly better this year than they were last year? And how are they significantly better than the Packers? I'll wait. We did the Rams. They're at 9. We've talked about this before. I don't understand why the Rams would be ahead of the Packers. By the way, our friends at FanDuel agree the Packers have shorter odds to win the Super Bowl and the division and the conference than the Rams, or at least they did last I checked. The Bucks ahead of the Packers. Defense still a major question. They did not do much at all. Hassan Reddick, who did not play football last year, they added. Okay, interesting. The Vikings, who are starting a rookie quarterback. ahead of the Packers? The Vikings, who are starting a rookie quarterback, ahead of the Packers? I can't argue with the Commanders ahead of the Packers, frankly. That's not the weird one. Like, if you told me the Commanders were 6th and then the Packers were 7th, I would go, okay, I buy that. If you think the Broncos are 14th, the Texans are 15th, the Cowboys are 16th, okay, I would buy that. I think that makes sense. The Packers at 13 make no sense. It makes no sense. The Eagles are the class of the NFC. Let's just do the NFC. The Lions, I'm totally willing to say, until proven otherwise, are the second best team. You cannot make the case to me right now today that the 49ers were or are a better team than the Green Bay Packers. You just can't. There's no compelling case. They're worse in a lot of ways this year. They're going to be healthier with Brandon Ayuk. That's about it. That's the big difference. I don't get it. The Bucs, look, the Bucs were fine last year. They won an incredibly easy division. They're going to play in an incredibly easy division again this year. They won 10 games last year. In a trash division, they won 10 games. What are we talking about? This is the proliferation of fantasy football. Everyone has Mike Evans on their fantasy football team. Everyone has Chris Godwin. They love Bucky Irving. It was the super sleeper of the year. They added a receiver. Ooh, this is sexy offseason. Make it make sense. The Packers won 11 games. Why do I bring this up? I bring this up to say this is what happens when you go from being a young team who outperforms expectation to being a young team who underperforms expectation, at least in the playoffs. If I told you before last year the Packers were going to win 11 games and go to the playoffs and they were going to lose to the eventual Super Bowl champions, you'd go, yeah, okay. Now you would hope that was like in the NFC Championship game or in the Super Bowl. It wasn't, but they lost to the best team. And they fought that team tooth and nail despite being down a number of key players and losing more in the game. It is different in 2024, and it is now, we're seeing this change a little bit. The window is shifting. I don't know if I want to quite call it the Overton window, but the window of your perspective on this team is shifting. Okay, we thought they were going to take that nice next step. Now it seems like they're not getting the same sort of love on a team that can take that next step. That maybe they've stalled out a little bit is the expectation. Well, if you're the Packers, you got to take that personally. Because I don't think they have. I know they don't think they have. But you got to go prove it. All right, Jason Hirschhorn joins me on the show this week. His UDFA prospectus that he writes every year has gone absolutely bonkers. People are loving it. You guys are sickos, and I love you. Thank you so much. Jason's going to come on the show this week, and we're going to talk about undrafted free agents because apparently you guys are just hot for undrafted free agents. I love it. Follow me on all the social medias. Follow the podcast on all the social medias. We're there for you. Clips on Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. Find us wherever you get podcasts. Go subscribe. Go leave a rating, a review. Go subscribe on our YouTube page where we have video podcasts of all of these so you can stay locked on Packers.